My name is Leah Patterson, and at 28 years old, I never imagined my own parents would publicly humiliate me at my wedding reception. But when my father grabbed the microphone and announced to 300 guests that they were ashamed to call me their daughter because I married beneath our family's status, I knew something had to change. What they didn't know was that my nobody husband had been hiding a secret that would destroy everything they thought they knew about success and social status. The moment of truth came 6 months later at Chicago O'Hare Airport, when my father saw my husband's face on every TV screen in the terminal. The color drained from his face as he realized what he had done. But by then it was already too late. Before I tell you what my husband had been hiding and why my parents are now desperately trying to repair the damage they caused, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe because this story will blow your mind. I grew up in what most people would consider paradise. Our family estate sprawled across 5 acres in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. My father, Marcus Patterson, and my mother, Victoria Patterson, had built Patterson Pharmaceuticals from nothing into a company worth over $800 million. From the outside, we were the perfect American success story. Inside those perfectly manicured walls was a completely different reality. From my earliest memories, I was never quite enough in their eyes. My older brother Daniel, 3 years my senior, seemed to embody everything my parents valued. He was logical, ambitious, and naturally gifted at understanding complex business concepts. "Leah, why can't you think strategically like your brother?" my mother would ask during our elaborate dinner parties. "Look how Daniel networks with our guests. That's how you build influence." I tried desperately to fit their mold. In 5th grade, I created a detailed business plan for a neighborhood dog walking service, complete with financial projections and marketing strategies. I presented it proudly to my parents, hoping to show them I could think like an entrepreneur. My father glanced at it briefly and said, "Cute hobby project. Maybe focus on your math grades instead." 3 months later, when Daniel started a lawn mowing business, they invested $5,000 and bragged about his business acumen to everyone at the country club. The inequality became painfully obvious throughout our childhood. For my 14th birthday, I received a savings bond and a lecture about fiscal responsibility. When Daniel turned 16, they surprised him with a BMW and announced they were setting up a trust fund for his future business ventures. "Daniel has the natural instincts for leadership," my mother explained when she saw my confused expression. "You're more artistic. Maybe you should cultivate that as a hobby while focusing on practical skills." She was right about the artistic part, though she meant it dismissively. I found refuge in painting, poetry, and eventually discovered my passion for helping others express themselves creatively. My grades remained excellent throughout high school. I graduated 3rd in my class, but my heart belonged to creative expression and human connection. College brought a new level of disparity. Despite my academic achievements, my parents insisted I take out student loans and work multiple part-time jobs. "Character building," my father declared. "You need to understand the value of every dollar." Meanwhile, Daniel attended Harvard Business School with a fully funded account that covered tuition, living expenses, spring break trips to networking conferences, and a luxury Boston apartment. I worked 30 hours a week between a campus coffee shop and tutoring center while pursuing my degree in psychology with a focus on art therapy. When my laptop crashed during finals week, I survived on instant noodles for 6 weeks to afford a replacement. When Daniel mentioned wanting a new computer during a family video call, my father ordered the latest MacBook Pro with professional software that same evening. "Daniel is studying to run multinational corporations," my mother rationalized. "His technology needs are more sophisticated than yours." By my junior year, I had accepted that I would never receive equal treatment or recognition. Instead of bitter resentment, I felt a strange liberation. I could finally stop trying to earn their approval and focus on building something meaningful with my life. I graduated magna cum laude and immediately found work as an art therapist at Chicago Children's Hospital. The pay was modest, but helping traumatized children find their voices through creative expression filled me with purpose I had never experienced. My parents introduced me to their social circle as our daughter who works at the hospital, deliberately omitting my actual role. When pressed for details, my mother would smile tightly and say, "She does counseling work." Very nurturing. At 26, I was professionally respected in my field, living independently in a cozy Lincoln Square apartment, and genuinely happy with the life I had built. I had stopped seeking my parents' validation and started measuring success by the positive impact I made on my young patients' lives. Then everything changed when I met David Chen at a hospital fundraising gala. The event was one of those obligatory charity functions where Chicago's wealthy elite gathered to write checks and be seen supporting worthy causes. I was there representing the art therapy department, trying to secure funding for our new trauma recovery program. Most attendees gave our booth polite nods before moving on to more prestigious departments. David was different. He stopped, asked thoughtful questions about our methods, and genuinely listened to my explanations about how creative expression helps children process trauma. He was tall with kind eyes, wearing a simple black suit that looked expensive but understated. "This work sounds incredibly important," he said after I explained one of our success stories. "How long have you been developing these techniques?" 3 years of trial and refinement, I replied. "But honestly, the children teach me more than any textbook ever could." He smiled. "That's the mark of someone who's found their calling. I'm David, by the way." "Leah," I responded, shaking his offered hand. "Are you involved with the hospital?" "Not officially. I'm here because I believe in supporting innovative approaches to healing. Traditional medical models don't always address the whole person." We talked for an hour about therapy, healing, and the importance of treating patients as complete human beings rather than collections of symptoms. David was articulate, thoughtful, and refreshingly humble despite clearly being well-educated and successful. "Would you like to continue this conversation over coffee sometime?" he asked as the evening wound down. I found myself saying yes before I had time to overthink it. Our first date was supposed to be a quick Saturday morning coffee. Instead, we spent 4 hours talking about everything from childhood memories to career aspirations. David was unlike anyone I had ever met. He was completely present in our conversation, asked genuine questions about my work, and shared his own experiences without any hint of pretension. Over the following months, we fell into a comfortable dating rhythm. David would pick me up after my hospital shifts, and we would explore Chicago together, trying hole-in-the-wall restaurants, visiting art museums, taking long walks along Lake Michigan. He was completely supportive of my demanding work schedule and never made me feel guilty about the emotional energy my job required. David was mysterious about his own work, describing it vaguely as consulting and project management. He traveled frequently for business, sometimes disappearing for a week at a time, but always returned with stories about interesting people he had met and places he had seen. He lived simply, drove a modest Toyota, and seemed more interested in experiences than material possessions. What impressed me most was how David treated people. He was equally respectful to restaurant servers, taxi drivers, and hospital administrators. He remembered small details about my colleagues and patients, asking follow-up questions about cases I had mentioned weeks earlier. He never tried to solve my professional challenges, but listened thoughtfully and offered emotional support when I had difficult days. After 6 months of dating, I realized I was deeply in love with him. David was intelligent without being arrogant, successful without being flashy, and kind without being weak. He supported my career ambitions, shared my values about helping others, and made me laugh even during stressful periods. When I decided to introduce David to my parents, I was nervous but hopeful. Despite our complicated history, they were still my family, and I wanted them to meet the man who made me so happy. I should have known better. The introduction happened during one of my parents' monthly dinner parties, elaborate affairs where Chicago's social elite gathered to network and display their wealth. I had warned David about the formal atmosphere and my parents' tendency to judge people based on superficial criteria. "Don't worry," he had said with his characteristic calm confidence. "I can handle a few hours of small talk and expensive wine." The evening started predictably. My parents greeted David with polite but cool formality, their expressions subtly assessing his modest suit and simple watch. Throughout dinner, they directed minimal conversation toward him, focusing instead on discussing business deals and social gossip with their other guests. David remained gracious despite their obvious dismissiveness. He complimented my mother on the meal, asked thoughtful questions about my father's pharmaceutical work, and engaged pleasantly with the other guests when addressed directly. The turning point came when Mrs. Whitmore, one of my mother's closest friends, asked David about his career. "I work in consulting," he replied simply. "Project management and strategic planning." "How interesting," she responded with thinly veiled condescension. "And which firm do you work for?" "I'm independent," David said. "I prefer the flexibility of choosing my own projects." The subtle looks exchanged around the table spoke volumes. Independent consultant was code for unemployed or unsuccessful in their social circle. These people valued prestigious company names, impressive titles, and clear markers of financial status. After David excused himself to take a phone call, my mother wasted no time expressing her concerns. "Leah, darling, he seems nice enough, but what kind of future can a freelance consultant provide? You're 27 years old. Don't you think it's time to consider your long-term security?" "David makes me happy, Mom. He's kind, intelligent, and supportive of my career." My father was more direct. "Happiness doesn't pay for private schools or country club memberships. You're from a prominent family, Leah. You have social obligations to consider." The conversation was interrupted when David returned, but the damage was done. For the rest of the evening, my parents treated him with polite but obvious dismissal, like a pleasant distraction who would eventually be replaced by someone more suitable. During the drive home, David was unusually quiet. "I'm sorry about tonight," I said. "They can be incredibly snobby about things that don't matter." David took my hand. "You don't need to apologize for other people's behavior. But I need you to know something. Their approval or disapproval has no impact on how I feel about you or our relationship." Looking back, I should have recognized the quiet confidence in his voice. But at the time, I was just grateful to be with someone who wouldn't let my parents' judgment affect our happiness. Over the next year, as David and I grew closer, my parents' attitude toward our relationship became increasingly problematic. They made pointed comments about my phase and regularly mentioned eligible bachelors from prominent Chicago families who had asked about me. "The Morrison boy just returned from London," my mother would say during our monthly phone calls. "He's taken over his father's investment firm. Such a nice young man, and he specifically asked about you at the charity auction." "Mom, I'm happy with David. We're talking about moving in together." "Living together?" Her voice sharpened. "Leah, that's hardly appropriate for someone in your position. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think. I care about building a life with someone who loves and respects me." The final confrontation happened during Thanksgiving dinner. My parents had invited several family friends, including the Morrison boy my mother had mentioned. Throughout the meal, they practically threw him at me, seating him beside me and steering every conversation toward his accomplishments and availability. David handled the obvious setup with remarkable grace, even engaging the younger Morrison in friendly conversation about his work in London. But I had reached my limit. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something," I announced as dessert was being served. "David and I are engaged." The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his wine glass carefully, his face darkening with barely controlled anger. "Engaged?" My mother repeated, her voice strained. "When did this happen?" "Last week," I replied, extending my hand to show them the simple but elegant ring David had chosen. "We wanted to tell you in person." My father stood abruptly. "Excuse us," he said to the guests. "Family discussion." He gestured for David and me to follow him to his study. Once the door closed, my father's composure completely cracked. "Are you out of your mind?" He shouted. "You're going to throw away everything we've built for some nobody consultant?" "David isn't a nobody," I replied firmly. "He's a good man who loves me." Good men don't matter in the real world, Leah. Money matters. Status matters. Connections matter. This man can't provide any of those things. My mother tried a softer approach. Darling, we're not saying he's a bad person. We're saying he's not right for you. You come from a family with responsibilities and expectations. David, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, I understand your concerns about Leah's future. But I love your daughter and I'm committed to building a good life with her. My father laughed bitterly. Love doesn't pay mortgages. Love doesn't maintain social standing. Love doesn't secure your children's future. You're right, David replied calmly. But respect, partnership, and shared values create strong foundations for marriage. That's what Leah and I have. My father's face reddened. Get out. Both of you. If you want to make this mistake, don't expect our support or blessing. 6 months later, David and I had a simple wedding ceremony at a small venue in downtown Chicago. We invited 50 close friends and colleagues, creating an intimate celebration focused on love and commitment rather than social spectacle. My parents not only refused to attend, they actively tried to sabotage the event. They called vendors to ask about cancellation policies, contacted the venue to express their concerns about our ability to pay, and even called some of my friends to suggest the wedding was a mistake. But the most devastating moment came during our reception. Despite being uninvited, my parents arrived with several members of their social circle, not to celebrate, but to make a statement. My father, clearly intoxicated, pushed his way to the microphone during the toasts. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying across our small gathering. I want everyone to know that Victoria and I are ashamed to call Leah our daughter. She has chosen to marry beneath her station and embarrass our family name. We will not be associated with this union or any children that result from it. The room fell into stunned silence. Our friends and colleagues stared in shock at the cruelty of his words. David stepped forward, his arm protective around my waist, but I was frozen with humiliation and hurt. My mother stood beside my father, her face cold and resolute. We raised you to understand your responsibilities, she added. You've chosen to throw that all away for some nobody. Don't come crawling back when reality sets in. They left immediately afterward, taking their friends and leaving our reception in shambles. Many of our guests tried to comfort David and me, but the damage was done. My own parents had publicly disowned me on what should have been the happiest day of my life. That night, as David held me while I cried, I made a decision. I would never again allow my parents' cruelty to hurt me. I would build a life based on the values David and I shared, and I would be successful on my own terms. What I didn't know was that David had been keeping a secret that would soon change everything. The first hint came 3 months after our wedding. David had been traveling more frequently, taking meetings in New York, Los Angeles, and occasionally London. When I asked about his increased travel schedule, he was vague but reassuring. Just some larger projects coming together, he said. Nothing to worry about. Everything should be more settled by the end of the year. I trusted him completely, so I didn't press for details. David had never given me reason to doubt his honesty or commitment. If he said his work was going well, I believed him. The second hint came when we started looking for a new apartment. Our lease was expiring, and we wanted to find a place with more space and better amenities. David seemed unusually confident about our budget, suggesting we look at properties that cost significantly more than what I assumed we could afford. Are you sure we can handle this rent? I asked as we toured a beautiful 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park. Trust me, he said with a mysterious smile. We'll be fine. What I didn't realize at the time was that David had been living far below his means for years. While I assumed we were a typical young couple managing modest incomes, he had been quietly accumulating wealth through his technology development work. The consulting projects he mentioned were actually lucrative contracts with major healthcare systems who were beta testing his AI platform. During this apartment hunting period, I started noticing other unusual behaviors. David would disappear for entire weekends, claiming he had intensive project deadlines. He would return exhausted but oddly energized, talking about breakthrough moments and system optimizations in language that seemed far more technical than typical business consulting would require. The most puzzling incident happened on a Thursday evening when I came home early from work due to a canceled meeting. I found David in our living room, participating in what appeared to be a highly sophisticated video conference. Through the partially open door, I could see multiple screens displaying complex data visualizations, and I heard him discussing neural network architectures and predictive modeling algorithms with several people who seemed to be calling in from different locations. The mortality prediction accuracy has improved to 94.7% with the latest dataset integration, David was saying in a tone I had never heard from him before, confident, authoritative, clearly expert level. The Stanford trials are showing consistent results, and Johns Hopkins wants to expand to their entire pediatric ICU system. I quickly retreated to the kitchen, not wanting to interrupt what was obviously an important business call. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I had overheard. Mortality prediction? Neural networks? These weren't terms I associated with general business consulting. When David emerged from the call an hour later, he seemed surprised to find me home early. "How was your day?" he asked casually, as if he hadn't just been discussing life-and-death medical technology with what sounded like major hospitals. "Fine," I replied, watching his face carefully. "Productive meeting?" "Yeah, just coordinating some project deliverables with the team." His answer was vague, but I caught a flicker of something in his expression, not deception exactly, but careful omission. That weekend, David's mysterious behavior intensified. On Saturday morning, he received a phone call that seemed to change everything about his demeanor. I watched him pace around our apartment, speaking in hushed but excited tones. "Are you absolutely certain about the FDA pathway?" he was asking. "Because if we can get expedited review status, we could have implementation in major health systems within 18 months instead of 3 years. FDA pathway? I worked in healthcare and knew that terminology was specific to medical device and pharmaceutical approvals. What kind of consulting project required FDA approval? One Saturday morning, I woke up to find David already dressed and packing a laptop bag I had never seen before, sleek, expensive-looking, with multiple compartments for sophisticated equipment. "Another weekend project?" I asked sleepily. "Something like that," he replied, kissing my forehead. "I'll be back Sunday evening. This should be one of the last intensive work sessions before everything stabilizes." After he left, curiosity got the better of me. I had never snooped through David's belongings, but his increasing secretiveness was starting to worry me. What if he was in financial trouble? What if the mysterious travel and long hours were signs of a business failing rather than succeeding? I opened his home office door for the first time since we had moved in together. What I found confused me more than it clarified anything. David's desk was covered with multiple monitors, sophisticated computer equipment that looked far more advanced than anything a typical consultant would need. There were whiteboards covered with complex diagrams, mathematical equations, and flowcharts that resembled nothing I had ever seen in business presentations. On his bookshelf were textbooks on artificial intelligence, machine learning, advanced statistics, and medical data analysis. These weren't the books of someone doing project management consulting, they were the resources of someone developing cutting-edge technology. But what struck me most were the printed emails and documents scattered across his workspace. I caught glimpses of names like Stanford Medical Center, Mayo Clinic Research Division, and Johns Hopkins Innovation Lab. These weren't typical consulting clients, they were some of the most prestigious medical institutions in the world. I quickly left the office, feeling guilty about invading his privacy, but more confused than ever about what David was actually working on. When I tried to casually ask him about his weekend project during dinner Sunday night, he was vague but seemed more relaxed than he had been in months. "Everything went really well," he said, with a smile that seemed to contain some private satisfaction. "I think we're very close to some major developments." "We?" "My project team. It's a collaborative effort with some brilliant people." I wanted to push for more details, but something in David's expression suggested he wasn't ready to share whatever he was working on. I decided to trust him and wait for him to tell me when he was ready. The third hint came when David started receiving unusual phone calls. They always happened when he thought I wasn't paying attention, and he would step outside or into another room to take them. The conversations seemed important and sometimes intense, but he never offered explanations afterward. I began to wonder if David was in some kind of financial trouble. The secrecy, the confident spending, the mysterious travel, it all seemed potentially problematic. But every direct question was met with reassurance and requests for patience. "There's something I need to tell you," David said one evening in early spring. "But I'm waiting for the right moment. Just trust me a little longer." The right moment, it turned out, would arrive in the most unexpected way possible. 6 months after our wedding, my father was traveling through Chicago O'Hare Airport, returning from a business trip to New York. He was walking through the terminal when something on the CNN screens caught his attention. Later, he would tell me that he stopped walking completely, staring at the screen in complete disbelief. The headline read, "Tech entrepreneur David Chen's revolutionary AI platform acquired by Google for $2.8 billion. The story showed photos of David shaking hands with Google executives, standing in front of massive screens displaying complex algorithms, and being interviewed by financial reporters about his groundbreaking artificial intelligence platform that had revolutionized predictive analytics for healthcare systems. My father stood in that airport terminal, watching his son-in-law, the nobody he had publicly humiliated, being hailed as one of the most innovative tech entrepreneurs of the decade. The reporter mentioned that David had been working on this platform for over 5 years, quietly building and testing it while living modestly and avoiding publicity. "Mr. Chen," the interviewer was saying, "your AI system is already being used by hospitals worldwide to predict and prevent medical crises. How does it feel to see your vision helping save lives on such a massive scale?" David, looking calm and professional in a way my father had never seen before, responded, "This was never about recognition or financial gain. It was about creating tools that help healthcare professionals provide better care for their patients. The fact that it's commercially successful is just a bonus." My father called me immediately, his voice shaking with shock and something that might have been panic. "Leah, I just saw the news about David." I had no idea. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Tell you what, Dad?" "About his company. About the acquisition. Google bought his platform for almost $3 billion. He's being called one of the most important healthcare tech innovators in the world." I was quiet for a long moment, processing what my father was telling me. David had mentioned something about a project conclusion that morning, but I had assumed it was just another consulting contract. "I didn't know the specifics," I said honestly. "David doesn't discuss his work in detail." "Leah, do you understand what this means? Your husband just became one of the wealthiest individuals in Chicago. He's not just successful, he's legendary." The irony was devastating for my father. The man he had called a nobody, the man he had publicly humiliated at our wedding, the man he had dismissed as unworthy of his daughter, was now being celebrated as a visionary who had created technology that would save millions of lives. That evening, David came home with an expression I had never seen before, part relief, part excitement, part apprehension. "I saw the news," I said before he could speak. "My father called me." David sat down heavily on our couch. "I wanted to tell you so many times. But I needed to know the acquisition was finalized before making any announcements. The past 5 years have been about building something meaningful, not about getting recognition. Why didn't you at least hint about the scope of what you were working on?" He took my hands. "Because I fell in love with you before any of this success materialized. I wanted to be certain that you loved me for who I am, not what I might achieve. And honestly, after meeting your parents, I wanted to see if they could accept me based on character rather than credentials. They failed that test spectacularly." David nodded sadly. "They did. And that tells you everything you need to know about their values." Over the next few days, the story exploded across national and international media. David's platform, called MedPredict, was being hailed as revolutionary for its ability to analyze patient data and predict medical emergencies before they occurred. Hospitals using the system had seen dramatic improvements in patient outcomes and reductions in preventable deaths. The financial implications were staggering. David's personal stake in the company, combined with the acquisition price, had made him worth over $1.2 billion overnight. But more importantly, his technology was already being implemented in children's hospitals, including the one where I worked. Your husband's system helped us identify 3 potential cardiac events in pediatric patients last week, my supervisor told me. Events we never would have predicted using traditional monitoring. Those children are alive because of his work. Meanwhile, my parents were experiencing their own reckoning. The same social circle that had witnessed them disown me was now buzzing with news about my nobody husband's extraordinary achievement. Phone calls, emails, and social media were full of congratulations for our family's connection to such a celebrated innovator. But the most painful aspect for my parents wasn't the missed opportunity for social status. It was the realization of how completely they had misjudged David's character and worth. The first attempt at reconciliation came in the form of an elaborate flower arrangement delivered to our apartment with a note, "We made a terrible mistake. Please let us make it right. Mom and Dad." I threw the flowers in the trash without reading David the note. The second attempt was my mother calling repeatedly, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about wanting to apologize and repair our relationship. The third attempt was my father showing up at the hospital where I worked, waiting in the parking lot for my shift to end. "Leah, please," he said as I approached my car. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied coldly. "You made your position clear at my wedding reception." We were wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. About David, about you, about everything that matters. I looked at my father, this powerful, successful man who had always seemed so certain of his judgment, and saw genuine desperation in his eyes. "Are you apologizing because you realize David is worth over $1 billion, or because you realized you misjudged his character?" My father was quiet for a long moment. If I'm being honest, the money got my attention first. But learning about his work, seeing how he's dedicated his career to saving lives, understanding that he chose to live modestly while building something meaningful, that's what made me realize how wrong we were about everything. "And what about me, Dad? Did you need David's success to realize I deserve your respect and love?" His face crumpled. "No. You deserved that all along. We failed you as parents long before we failed to recognize David's worth. We were so obsessed with appearances and status that we missed the most important things: your happiness, your character, your choice to build a life based on genuine values." I wanted to stay angry, to protect myself from further disappointment. But seeing my father's genuine remorse, I felt something unexpected, not forgiveness, but the possibility of it. "I need time," I told him. "And I need to know that any relationship going forward is based on who David and I actually are, not what we might be able to do for your social standing." "Of course," he said quickly. "Whatever you need. We just want a chance to be the parents you deserved all along." The road back wasn't simple or quick. David and I agreed to have dinner with my parents 2 months later, but the conversation was stilted and careful. My parents were trying so hard to appear accepting and supportive that they seemed like different people entirely. The dinner took place at a neutral restaurant downtown, not their usual exclusive country club, but not our casual neighborhood spot either. My parents arrived early, sitting stiffly at the table as if preparing for a business negotiation rather than a family reconciliation. "You both look well," my mother began carefully, her eyes darting between David and me as if afraid to make direct contact for too long. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," my father added, his voice carrying none of its usual commanding authority. "We know we have a lot to make up for." The conversation felt forced and artificial. My parents asked polite questions about our work, our apartment, our future plans, all topics they had previously dismissed or criticized. David answered graciously, but I could feel the tension in his responses. He was being diplomatic rather than genuine, protective rather than open. We've been following the news about MedPredict, my father said carefully. The impact your platform is having on healthcare outcomes is remarkable. We had no idea you were working on something so significant. I prefer to keep work and personal life separate, David replied simply. The technology speaks for itself. My mother tried a different approach. Leah, we want you to know how proud we are of your career. We never properly acknowledged how important art therapy is for healing trauma. You called it playing with crayons, I replied, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. The uncomfortable silence that followed reminded us all how much damage had been done. Apologies and acknowledgments, however sincere, couldn't immediately erase years of dismissal and the public humiliation of our wedding reception. We know we can't undo what we said and did, my father finally admitted. We were wrong about everything that matters. We let our obsession with social status blind us to what actually makes a successful life. And what do you think makes a successful life? David asked quietly. My parents exchanged glances, clearly having discussed this question before arriving. Making a positive difference in the world, my mother said slowly. Building relationships based on genuine care and respect. Living according to your values rather than other people's expectations. Those are the right words, I said. But do you actually believe them, or are you saying what you think we want to hear? The question hung in the air, challenging them to prove their transformation was real rather than performative. The real breakthrough came when my mother visited me at work to see the art therapy program firsthand. She spent an afternoon observing my sessions with traumatized children, watching how creative expression helped them process difficult experiences and begin healing. I never understood, she said afterward, tears in her eyes. I thought art therapy was just playing with crayons. I didn't realize you were helping these children find ways to survive and recover from terrible experiences. This is why I chose this career, Mom. Not because it's prestigious or well-paid, but because it makes a difference in people's lives. Just like David chose to create technology that saves lives rather than pursuing something more obviously profitable. Exactly. We taught you and Daniel to value the wrong things, she continued. We focused so much on appearances and financial success that we forgot the most important question. Are you making the world better? The healing process took over a year. There were setbacks and difficult conversations. My parents had to confront not just their treatment of David, but decades of prioritizing status over substance, wealth over character, appearances over authenticity. But gradually we built something new. Not the relationship we had before that was too damaged to repair, but something healthier and more honest. The most meaningful moment came during David's first major interview after the acquisition. The journalist asked him about his decision to live modestly and work quietly for so many years. I was raised to believe that meaningful work speaks for itself, David replied. If you're building something important, you don't need to advertise it or seek recognition. You just focus on making it the best it can be. But surely the financial rewards must be satisfying after years of living so simply? David smiled. The money is nice, but it was never the goal. The real satisfaction comes from knowing that our technology is helping doctors save lives. My wife works with traumatized children, and now she has access to better tools for predicting and preventing medical crises in her patients. That matters more than any bank balance. Watching that interview, my parents finally understood something crucial. True success isn't about impressing other people or accumulating status symbols. It's about creating value, helping others, and staying true to your principles even when no one is watching. Today, 3 years after that humiliating wedding reception, our family looks completely different. David and I have used a portion of his acquisition money to establish a foundation supporting innovative approaches to healthcare and trauma recovery. We still live modestly by billionaire standards, but comfortably enough to focus on work we're passionate about rather than financial concerns. The Patterson Foundation, as we named it, has become one of the most respected charitable organizations in healthcare innovation. We fund research projects at universities worldwide, support small startups developing medical technologies, and provide grants to hospitals in underserved communities. But our most meaningful work involves supporting art therapy programs in children's hospitals across the globe. The Foundation's first major initiative was expanding the art therapy program at Chicago Children's Hospital, where I had worked for years. With David's technology background and my clinical expertise, we created an integrated approach that combines traditional art therapy with digital tools and predictive analytics. Children can now express themselves through both physical art making and digital creative platforms, while our systems help therapists identify breakthrough moments in the healing process. Mrs. Chen, one of my former colleagues, called to tell me, "The new digital art therapy suite you funded has revolutionized our trauma recovery program. Children who couldn't communicate verbally about their experiences are creating digital stories, animations, and interactive art that helps us understand their needs better." Hearing about the impact of our work, I realized that my parents' rejection had actually led to something more meaningful than I could have imagined. If they had accepted David from the beginning, he might never have felt motivated to prove himself through his groundbreaking technology. If they had supported my career choices, I might never have developed the resilience and independence that now allowed me to help children on an international scale. The Foundation also funds scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who want to pursue careers in healthcare technology or therapeutic arts. Each year, we award 50 full scholarships to students who demonstrate both academic potential and genuine commitment to helping others. David's work has continued evolving beyond the original MedPredict platform. His new projects focus on developing AI tools specifically designed to support mental health interventions, creating predictive models for identifying at-risk children before trauma occurs, and building communication technologies that help nonverbal patients express their needs and experiences. The next frontier isn't just predicting medical emergencies, David explained during a recent Foundation board meeting. It's creating technology that supports emotional and psychological healing, tools that amplify human connection rather than replacing it. One of his most innovative recent developments is a virtual reality system that allows traumatized children to create immersive art experiences. Children who have difficulty expressing themselves through traditional methods can build entire virtual worlds that represent their inner experiences, giving therapists unprecedented insight into their healing process. We tested this technology first at Chicago Children's Hospital, working with a group of children who had experienced severe trauma and had been largely non-responsive to traditional therapeutic interventions. The results were remarkable. Children who hadn't spoken about their experiences in months began creating elaborate virtual environments that told their stories in ways words never could. One 8-year-old girl who had been in foster care after experiencing severe abuse created a virtual world filled with dark tunnels that gradually opened into bright, colorful gardens. Through her digital art making, she was able to show us her journey from fear to hope in ways that traditional therapy had never accessed. Her social worker told us it was the first breakthrough they had seen in over a year. The technology isn't meant to replace human connection or traditional art therapy. It's designed to enhance and amplify the healing power of creative expression. Therapists can enter the virtual worlds children create, experiencing their stories from the inside and gaining deeper understanding of their emotional landscapes. This changes everything about how we approach childhood trauma, Dr. Sarah Martinez, head of pediatric psychology at Children's National Hospital, told me during one of our Foundation visits. We're not just talking about incremental improvements in treatment outcomes. We're seeing fundamental transformations in how quickly children can access and process traumatic memories. The virtual reality system has now been implemented in over 200 hospitals worldwide, with training programs for therapists and ongoing support for technical integration. But perhaps most importantly, the children using this technology are showing remarkable improvements in their ability to communicate, trust adults, and begin healing from their experiences. David's work continues to evolve in ways that still surprise me. Last month, he showed me prototypes for a new project, AI-powered communication devices for children with autism and other conditions that affect verbal communication. The devices learn each child's unique patterns of expression, whether through movement, drawing, music, or other forms of nonverbal communication, and help translate those expressions into language that others can understand. Every child has something important to communicate, David explained as he demonstrated the technology. Our job is to create tools that amplify their voices, not change them. The device we watched could interpret a nonverbal child's drawings and movement patterns, identifying emotional states, needs, and preferences with remarkable accuracy. It wasn't trying to make the child communicate like other children, it was learning to understand and translate the child's natural communication style. Our foundation has also expanded internationally, partnering with organizations in countries where resources for mental health and trauma recovery are limited. We've established art therapy programs in refugee camps, funded training for local therapists, and created mobile units that bring creative healing tools to remote communities. Last year, I traveled to Jordan to visit one of our refugee camp programs. Working with children who had fled war and violence, I saw again how universal the healing power of creative expression can be. Language barriers, cultural differences, and traumatic experiences couldn't prevent these children from finding their voices through art, music, and storytelling. One Syrian boy, maybe 10 years old, spent weeks painting the same image over and over, a house with a red door and yellow windows. Through an interpreter, he eventually told me it was his family's house in Aleppo, destroyed in bombing. Each time he painted it, he was rebuilding his home, recreating the safety and love he had lost. Art doesn't need translation, his therapist told me. Pain and healing speak the same language everywhere. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something I never thought possible: mutual respect. They've learned to value character over credentials, impact over income, and authenticity over appearances. I've learned to forgive without forgetting, to build boundaries that protect my well-being while allowing for genuine connection. Most importantly, I've learned that the people who judge you most harshly often understand you least. Living authentically, choosing partners based on character rather than status, and defining success on your own terms isn't just personally fulfilling. It's the foundation for building something truly meaningful. David's story reminds us that the most impressive achievements often happen quietly, away from public recognition. Sometimes the person everyone dismisses as ordinary is actually working on something extraordinary. My parents' transformation reminds us that people can change, but only when they're forced to confront the consequences of their values and choices. And my own journey reminds me that seeking approval from people who don't share your values is a waste of time and energy. The most important validation comes from living according to your principles and making a positive difference in the world. If you've ever been judged for your choices in partners or career, remember this: the people doing the judging might not be qualified to assess what really matters. Stay true to your values, support those you love, and trust that authentic success has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. Have you ever had to defend your life choices against family pressure? How did you handle criticism from people whose values didn't align with yours? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be facing similar challenges. Remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's approval, and sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that survive the test of staying true to yourself.